Welcome to the Kendo and Aido Italia podcast in this English language version. Enjoy listening.
Welcome to Kendo and Aido Italia, the podcast. Thank you for joining us again for this exciting new episode. Okay, let's unpack this deep dive. Our listener has provided, really an incredible resource, a comprehensive guide to practicing Kendo basics at home, specifically focusing on self-correction and form. This looks like the perfect stack for anyone who needs, a quick but really thorough assessment of their solo training regimen.
Yeah, it's fascinating. What's really striking here is the materials focus on those tiny details, the kind of things that routinely get overlooked when you're training alone, things a sensei might spot in, like the first 3 seconds, right?
Yeah.
But if you're on your own, you can actually cement these errors into muscle memory over, potentially years.
That's the danger, isn't it?
Exactly. The material hammers this home again and again.
Right.
If you aren't paying super close attention, hypervigilant, you can be perfecting the wrong thing for a very, very long time. So our mission today really is to pull out those crucial self-checkpoints, those non-negotiable nuggets of knowledge that let you, the learner, essentially step into the role of your own sensei.
Be your own guide.
Precisely. It transforms that solitary practice from maybe mindless repetition into something highly efficient, really targeted skill acquisition.
Absolutely. And this goes way beyond just swinging the stick, doesn't it? We're talking about everything from the instant details of posture and grip, right through the mechanics of striking, breathing techniques, which are critical, and even how to use partner drills correctly by understanding the internal mechanisms. We are diving deep into the why certain movements are structurally sound, biomechanically correct, understanding that rationale is just essential for fast, sustainable improvement.
It really is.
Because when you're training solo, the absolute worst thing you can do is reinforce a bad habit. And this guide seems to provide all the necessary alarms and checks to stop that happening, to prevent that structural decay.
And it all starts, as it should, right at the very beginning, that stationary moment before any action even happens. That's often the most revealing point, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. Where habits are set. So we start before any movement begins. Carrying the sword, taita, and how you initially set your grip. The source offers some incredibly specific, almost obsessive details here. Details that really separate just, holding equipment from adopting proper martial posture and intent.
Yeah. And if we step back for just a second, the core idea here is pretty simple. Good posture prevents bad habits right from the get-go. If your body isn't aligned and ready, that very first movement is going to be flawed. It just has to be. So when you're performing taita, that stance for carrying the sword before the draw, the first check is your whole body alignment. Body straight, vertical, heels together. Grounded. That simple upright posture sets the foundation. It grounds your center of gravity, your hara, for everything that comes next.
And the sword placement itself is critical. Let's zoom in on the left hand position when you're carrying the shinai or bokuto. Left hand in front of the body, and this is key, isn't it? The suba, the handguard, should be right beside your body.
Yes, virtually touching your side, or maybe slightly forward. And this is where the source gives an immediate common correction. A frequent error. It explicitly calls it wrong if the sword is carried way out to the side, kind of dangling away from your center line.
Why is that so bad? It just looks sloppy.
Well, it's more than just looks. If the sword is out there, you lose structural integrity immediately. And you're basically advertising a weak point. It needs to be close, centered, kept near the front of the body. This closeness gives you instant control and ensures you're ready for the draw. That control is paramount. The sword needs to feel like an extension of your center.
Okay, so left hand controls the carry close to the body. What about the right hand?
The right hand is already getting ready for action. In taito, it should be ready, maybe hovering or lightly touching near where the handle, the tsuka, would be if it were sheathed. It's anticipating dukitsuke, the draw.
Right. But you mentioned a real aha moment, a detail about the grip itself, the thumb placement.
Yes, this is one of those tiny things that often separates experienced practitioners from beginners. Even just carrying the sword, the source is really insistent on a very specific thumb configuration.
Okay, let's unpack this. The instruction is thumb slightly off the center line of the handle, not right on the seam or the spine. Why? It seems so minor.
It does seem minor until you think about what happens next, the draw, especially from a saya, a scabbard. The reason given is rooted in, two things, safety and efficiency. Think about pulling a curved blade out of a snug scabbard. If your thumb is perfectly centered on that handle.
I see where this is going.
Yeah. There's a really high chance that your thumb, especially the fleshy part at the base, is going to catch the rim of the scabbard, the koiguchi. That can cause a jolt, mess up your draw, or worse, you could actually risk a pretty nasty injury as the sword comes out.
A serious injury,
Yeah.
like caught thumb or actually cut.
Could be both, potentially. But mostly it's about getting caught, badly bruised, leading to an awkward, weak, fumbled draw. By keeping that thumb just slightly off-center, usually to the right side of the swords on your left hip, you create a tiny bit of clearance, a protective space for that digit. The source says this position, slightly off-center and locked in with the rest of the grip, ensures a smooth, safe path for the draw. And you still maintain a secure, ready hold. It's a small anatomical tweak with huge practical benefits for safety and good initial technique.
So even if I'm at home with just a shinai or bokuto, no scabbard in sight, setting my grip like that is training the right muscle memory for when it does matter.
Exactly. You're locking the grip internally, like the source says, making sure the fingers are engaged right away, ready to apply force.
Right.
Okay. So often, this detail gets skipped in solo practice because there's no scabbard there demanding you do it right. But by starting stationary practice correctly, body aligned, sword close, thumb set, just so you eliminate those foundational errors before you even start moving, the foundation has to be solid, right?
Yeah.
Because everything else builds on top of it.
Right. So now we take that solid stationary posture and ignite it into action. The draw, Nukitsuka. Even if you're practicing without a saya, the source insists you need to understand the function of the draw. It's not just pulling a stick out. It's focused, powerful, a full body transition from rest to engagement.
And that brings up the critical question for you practicing alone. What mechanics are absolutely essential even when the physical prop, the scabbard, isn't there? The answer really lies in internalizing the movement. The draw has to start from that internal body movement. That's what turns a simple lift into a dynamic offensive cut. If you just treat it like lifting the sword, well, you're missing maybe 80% of the power source.
Okay, let's break down these new Kitsuke mechanics. The drawing out. It starts with something small, often missed.
Yes, it's deceptive. It begins with an initial tiny movement. You need to initiate a mental push, or if you actually have a saya, a slight physical push forward to unlock the sword from the scabbard mouth. Simulating that tiny critical unlocking moment, even just mentally, is key to visualizing the technique correctly, even in an empty-handed drill.
Unlock first, then what?
Then, the draw itself starts by moving the tip, the kensaki, towards the opponent. The path has to be purposeful, aggressive, and the source is crystal clear here. Avoid drawing too low.
Why is drawing low such a problem, beyond maybe just missing the target initially?
Well, a low draw immediately weakens your defensive posture. It slows down your offense too. If you draw the sword way down low before bringing it up to cut, you're wasting time, wasting energy, and you're exposing your whole midsection. The ideal path keeps the kensaki driving towards the opponent's eyes or throat, the highest, most direct line of attack as fast as possible. Aggressive, purposeful movement towards the target. Maximize surprise, maximize speed.
Okay, direct path. But the real power doesn't come from the arm. The source talks about a body twist for power.
Yes, this is absolutely crucial. The power needs to come from your core, not your arms and shoulders alone. The practitioner must twist their body, hips, and torso, rotating to power the draw. You're not just stretching your arms out or relying only on shoulder muscles.
So engaging the core's rotational muscles.
Exactly. If you only use your arm, the movement's weak, it's segmented, it's localized, just shoulders and biceps doing the work. But when you actively start the draw by twisting the torso, you harness that huge rotational force from your hips and abdomen. That twist provides the more power the source talks about. It turns your entire body mass into the start of the cut. It's a full body thing happening in a split second, which is why you have to practice it slowly first to make sure that core initiation is actually happening.
That coordination sounds immense. The initial push, the core rotation, the arm extension, all working together for an instant cut.
It is. And that brings us to the reverse action. No-to mechanics. Sheathing the sword. Now, if you are using a saya, this is complex. You have to push the scabbard back, usually with the left hand or using body movement, while the right hand guides the sword tip in. Crucially, it is not just a right-hand movement.
That's a detail often missed, especially with a shinai. You focus on the right hand guiding the blade, but the left hand's job managing the scabbard gets forgotten, even mentally.
Right. But the left hand provides that essential counterpressure, the stability, and the really delicate guidance needed to find the scabbard opening, ideally without looking down. So this becomes a critical self-checkpoint, even in solo Shinai practice. Even if you're omitting the physical sheathing, knowing this complex, coordinated motion means you understand the recovery mechanics involve both sides working together. Without mentally rehearsing that left-hand mechanism, the return becomes clumsy. You rely too much on the right arm, destabilize your posture.
So understanding no-toe, even conceptually, make sure your recovery movements are structured, efficient, sets you up for the next move instead of leaving you off balance. Okay, this whole sequence, carry, draw, return, it's a continuous full body check. If any part feels like it's just your arms doing the work,
You know immediately you've broken form. You've lost that core connection.
All right, now we hit the core function, the strike itself, Suburi, the fundamental striking practice. If the first parts were about getting ready and recovering, this is about the cut. And this is where the source becomes, well, absolutely essential. It's packed with specific mistakes, errors that are so easy to make and then cement into bad habits when you're practicing alone, no sensei watching. This really needs our closest attention.
Agreed. This is vital for you, the learner. We have to focus on these alignment checks.
Sure.
The absolute non-negotiables for an efficient cut, for getting maximum power, and honestly, for preventing injuries down the line. Let's start where the power originates and transfers. Shoulder and abdominal.
The source is really emphatic here. Shoulders must be kept back. Do not roll them forward. Keep the back straight. Why is that forward shoulder roll so bad for a kendo strike?
Rolling the shoulders forward. It basically compromises the structural integrity of your whole kinetic chain. When they roll forward, sure, maybe you feel like you're reaching, but you actually shorten your effective reach. Worse, you start over-engaging your chest muscles and front deltoids. This tightens up your upper back, reduces the flexibility and the power you can get from your lats, the big latissimus dorsi muscles, and the other large back muscles that should be driving that downward force.
So you end up pushing, not cutting.
Pretty much. You're essentially punching the air rather than executing a powerful downward cut. You sacrifice leverage and end up relying too much on just the smaller, isolated arm muscles. Keeping those shoulders back and the back straight ensures the power generated from your legs and core travels cleanly up the spine, through the shoulders, and down the arms into the shinai.
This needs constant mental checking, doesn't it? Especially when you get tired. That's when the shoulders tend to creep forward.
Precisely. That's the moment things break down. You absolutely have to train yourself to use your back, not just your arms. Quick check. If you feel a lot of strain in the front of your shoulders or your neck, you're probably rolling forward. That's your first internal alarm bell.
Okay, shoulders back, back straight. Next up, the most basic visual check. The path of the sword. The rule sounds simple. Straight up, straight down. But the source points out most people think they're going straight, but there's usually a slight unconscious curve or arc happening.
This is the insidious part of solo practice, isn't it? Lack of immediate external feedback. But the source gives some great practical advice here. If you don't have a full-length mirror, or maybe your ceiling's too low to really see the kansaki's path clearly, you have to isolate the movement. Try practicing just the hand movement, no sword. Or maybe palms together. Focus purely on making your hands track straight up your center line and straight back down.
Isolates the error source.
Yeah, it brings it down to just your hands and shoulders. Makes it much easier to feel and correct. A crooked strike usually means one elbow is flaring out, or maybe one hand is dominating the movement when it shouldn't be.
Are there other physical checks for straightness, besides just watching your hands?
You could try standing very close to a wall. Just enough clearance so the shinai can travel straight down without hitting it. If you deviate off that straight line...
You'll hear it or feel it.
Exactly. Another thing is sound. An efficient, straight strike often has a consistent sound through the air. If you hear a sudden, loud whoosh, then silence, you might be whipping the sword offline somewhere. Straightness requires constant control through the whole path.
Okay. Now moving to safety and control. This is a big one. Avoiding tip drop and wrist issues. This section reads almost like a safety manual. The crucial rule, do not drop the tip the kansaki too low, especially when you're raising the sword coming up into joden.
Yeah, this point needs to be taken very seriously. The danger, as the source highlights, is specific and potentially quite severe. If you drop that tip too much, you risk actually poking yourself in the stomach area. Right with Itachi, the curved sword in Aido would rest. It's in the danger zone. This kind of accidental self-strike, especially if you're practicing fast and maybe losing control, can be quite nasty. It usually comes from letting the right hand drop too low, too early in the lift, losing control of the kansaki's arc.
Which leads directly to the specific rule about hand height, doesn't it? The right hand must be slightly higher than, or at minimum, parallel to the left hand throughout the movement. Never let the right hand drop lower than the left. Why is that relationship so critical?
It comes down to the basic mechanics of a lever. Your left hand is the primary control point, right at the end of the end of the lever. The right hand acts more as a stabilizer and an accelerator. Now, if that right hand drops lower than the left, it starts working against the left hand's leverage. It forces the left arm to carry all the weight in a really awkward, structurally weak position. Keeping that relative height right, slightly higher or parallel, ensures the tip stays within a safe, controlled arc. It gives maximum leverage to the left hand and keeps the structure of the strike solid. This is a huge checkpoint for solo practice, especially during that upward phase of the swing.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's look at the other end of the movement after the strike or during the recovery phase. Left elbow and armpit control. The source warns strongly against letting the left elbow come up or flare out when the sword is lowered.
The dreaded elbow flare. It's one of the most common errors you see. When that elbow flares out, it opens up the armpit, which the source flatly calls pretty bad. And biomechanically, it is bad. Opening the armpit, letting the elbow rise or drift sideways away from your body, instantly weakens your grip and your whole structure. It disengages that powerful lat muscle under your arm, forces your bicep and shoulder joint to take over all the work they're not designed for. The result: a weak recovery, an exposed flank, and it really limits your ability to transition quickly into another strike. The armpit needs to stay closed, maintaining that strong triangular structure with your torso.
Okay, so if I'm practicing slowly, trying to check my form, and I notice it breaking down, what's the warning sign? How do I know?
The source gives a brilliant physical alarm signal here. If your left wrist starts to feel strained or maybe just frustrated, meaning it hurts, or the movement feels unnatural and awkward, that is the absolute lowest point you should go. Stop right there, immediately. Pain or significant strain in the wrist or elbow is your body screaming that your form is broken down. It probably means you flared the elbow or dropped the right hand too low, putting nasty torque on those joints. Rule 1. Never push through joint pain when practicing basics. Use that pain as your form correction guide.
That focus on the left hand leads us perfectly into the final piece of this foundation. Grip specificity, the V grip. We're explicitly warned off the karate grip, palms flat against the handle.
Right, the karate grip, where you try to maximize the hand surface contact. It actually sacrifices the whip and snap you need for a proper cut. It encourages you to just muscle the shine eye around with your forearm instead of using your wrist flexors effectively. Instead, you need to make sure there's a distinct V shape formed by your hands, especially near the guard. That V shape is crucial. It allows for the necessary wrist articulation and gives you maximum leverage. It enables the sword to accelerate just before the point of impact, that crucial snap.
And all that power, all that control is anchored right at the bottom of the left hand. The grip needs to be good grip, concentrating pressure in the bottom two fingers, pinky and ring finger, keeping them tight, really tight.
This might be the single most critical detail for control. If you loosen those bottom two fingers of the left hand, you immediately lose fine control over the kanchaki. It prevents the effective transfer of that rotational power coming up from your core. If those two fingers are anchored tightly, the rest of the hand supports the movement, naturally. But the control, the stopping power, and the ability to execute that final accelerating snap, it comes almost exclusively from the tension held by the pinky and ring finger. This foundational grip ensures your wrist can snap correctly at the end without letting the sword wobble off plane.
Wow. This level of detail on just the basic Suburi alignment, this is what makes this guide so invaluable if you're training alone. It turns a simple up and down swing into a complex checklist of, 10 different potential failure points?
At least. And catching them yourself is the challenge and the reward.
Okay, we've done the big, powerful Suburi strike. Now, where does this sword actually stop? And, maybe more importantly, how do we control all that downward momentum we just created? The source gives really clear visual markers for this and explains how to stop the tip from drifting way too high after the hit.
Yeah, this is pure physics in action, really. It's a system of forces. The power you generated from the body twist and that downward whip has to be arrested efficiently. You need to turn that momentum into focused energy at the impact point and then stop clean, ready for whatever's next. And what's fascinating here is the direct, absolute link between where your hands stop and how the kansaki, the tip, behaves.
The rule for the stopping point is super specific. The finished strike should stop with the left hand at about solar plexus height.
Let's visualize that. Left hand held firmly right at the center of your chest, roughly where your lower ribs meet. Why that specific height? It's entirely about controlling the sword tip. If that left hand drops too low, say, down towards your belt or your hip, all the momentum you built up in the sword tip just gets released upwards. It causes the tip to flip up, often way past the opponent's head, or just dangerously high and uncontrolled. To keep that tip low, under control, aligned along the proper cutting angle, the left hand must be held rigidly at that solar plexus height. If the tip flies high, you've lost the feeling of the cut, you've wasted energy, and frankly, you're telegraphing a lack of control.
Okay, so if I'm practicing alone and I see that kansaki flicking up high at the end of my cut, my immediate fix is bring the left hand up higher and hold it there firmly at the finish.
Exactly. You're using the tip's behavior as direct feedback for your left hand's final position. And just like in the Suburi preparation, we need to maintain alignment right through the finish. The source insists, shoulders down, elbows down during the deceleration phase.
Why depress the shoulder and elbow at the end of the strike? Wouldn't the momentum naturally make them want to fly up?
And that's the key difference between a controlled strike and just an uncontrolled swing. If your shoulder and your left elbow rise up at the end, you've opened that vulnerable armpit again.
There it is again.
And you've lost control of your leverage. Maintaining that depressed position, shoulders down, elbow tucked in close, ensures the power you generated translates into a decisive stop. It keeps the structural integrity you need to defend immediately or transition smoothly to the next movement. Remember, the power comes from the core and back, which means the shoulder complex needs to stay relatively relaxed, but locked down low.
Okay, now we get to the proof, the physical evidence, checking the snap. This sounds like a really tangible feedback mechanism for solo practice, a way to feel if you did the strike efficiently, transfer the energy correctly through the wrists.
Yeah, this check usually requires something with a bit of weight, like a bokuto or maybe a heavier Suburi too. If your left-hand grip is tight specifically, if you really maintain that pressure on the bottom two fingers we talked about, you should physically feel the sword snap forward right at the very end of the strike. It's often described as a momentary whiplash effect. The tip seems to accelerate just a fraction faster than your hands and then stops dead.
What's actually causing that physical snap?
It's the moment of controlled energy release. As your body mass decelerates your shoulders, your torso, stopping that tight grip, allows your wrist extensors and flexors to execute one final, tiny whip-like acceleration. Think about the very end of a bullwhip cracking. All the energy travels down the length and culminates in maximum acceleration right at the tip. That feeling of kansaki seeming to go slightly extra forward signifies you got the momentum transfer right. You achieved superior stopping power. It proves your wrist was active in the cut, not just passively holding on. If you don't feel that snap, chances are you're muscling the strike with your arms, or, crucially, those bottom two left fingers went loose at the end.
That sensation, that snap, that's the difference between just hitting something and actually executing a cut with slicing force. It tells you you're generating the right kind of energy. Now, the source does acknowledge something important, handling differing school philosophies regarding the finish height of the hands.
Yes, and this is really important context. The source is upfront that some traditions, some sensei, might teach that the right hand should finish higher, maybe around shoulder height. You might see this more in certain styles of competitive Kendo, where maximizing reach for a point is the priority. However, the instruction we're discussing today emphasizes keeping the shoulders down and the armpit closed, aiming for maximum cutting ability.
So why the preference for this lower, more structurally locked finish, especially in foundational training?
Because this instruction is rooted in traditional katana usage principles. It's focused on the most biomechanically efficient way to transfer force for a clean, powerful cut. When you maintain that lower, locked shoulder position, you align the force downwards more effectively. You force your body to use the lats and core to stabilize and stop the power. If the right hand finishes high, it often encourages the shoulders to lift and the armpit to open up, which, as we've said, compromises the structure. It can sacrifice cutting depth for maybe a slightly broader but potentially less powerful hitting motion. So the focus here for building a solid foundation in solo practice is structural integrity. Shoulder down, armpit closed, left hand locked at the solar plexus. This trains your body for cutting efficiency, not just for reach.
Okay, we've drilled down into the mechanics of posture, grip, the draw, the cut, the finish. But training at home isn't just about doing the movements, is it? It needs a strategy. The material really emphasizes setting a clear, deliberate goal for every single practice session. This sounds like a massive shortcut to efficiency, stops you just, aimlessly swinging.
Absolutely. If we step back again, the underlying principle is simple but powerful. Knowing your objective for that session, Is it form today? Is it speed? Is it endurance? That dictates the entire structure of your practice. If you try to mix all those goals together in one session, you probably won't achieve any of them effectively. This is the core of goal-oriented practice.
The source lays out 3 distinct, non-overlapping goals you need to decide on before you even start Suburi. What are they again?
Right. 1, checking form, and this absolutely must be done slowly. 2, increasing speed. And 3, increasing endurance, focusing on your arms and shoulders holding up.
So if my goal today is pure form, check. I want to check that thumb position, the elbow flare, the right hand height.
Then your practice has to be incredibly slow, almost agonizingly slow sometimes. The source even suggests you might not need the sword at all for this. You can just use your palms together, focusing entirely on feeling the shoulder and hand alignment, ensuring your body is tracking straight. This slow, deliberate practice is where you truly find and fix those little biomechanical glitches. Speed hides errors, slowness reveals everything.
Okay, so form checks are slow, almost meditative, all about precision. When do I move on to speed or endurance work?
Only, and I mean only, once you've confirmed your form is stable and correct during slow movement. Repeatedly. If your goal then shifts to endurance, that's when you move on to normal Suburi. The recommendation is to start with a manageable number, say 30 reps, and gradually aim to increase that quantity over time. Endurance training builds the stability needed to maintain good form even when you're physically stressed or tired. But the form has to be solid first. You should really never work on speed or high rep endurance until your basic form is confirmed and reconfirmed.
Makes sense. Build the foundation, then stress test it. Now let's integrate power generation through breathing and Kiai, shouting. The source links these directly to core strength and keeping that structure solid. First, the basic mechanics. Breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth.
Yes, but the crucial element here is stomach breathing, sometimes called abdominal breathing, or connecting to your hara, that center of gravity just below the navel. You have to consciously breathe deeply into your stomach. Feel it expand, like inflating a balloon. Not taking shallow breaths up high in your chest. This is absolutely critical for developing a proper Kiai and for maintaining a stable posture.
Right. If you breathe into your chest, your whole posture tends to rise, shoulders tense up, breathing gets shallow. How does breathing into the hara actually translate into power?
When you fill your abdomen with air, you naturally stabilize your entire core. It lowers your center of gravity and maximizes the engagement of your deep abdominal muscles. Then, when you scream or shout the Kiai, the energy, the sound, must originate from that lower core, from your abs, not just from your throat. If the shout comes just from your throat, it sounds thin, sharp, and it's physically exhausting. But if it comes from the core, driven by those abs, it's deep, resonant, powerful. It projects intent without just shredding your vocal cords.
And the source gives a really unique, almost practical joke way to check if you're doing your Kiai right.
Haha, yeah, it's brilliant.
Right.
The check is simple. If you are correctly using those deep abdominal muscles for your Kiai, your stomach muscles will probably be sore the next day. That specific muscle soreness is your confirmation that you use the right muscles, your core, to project that power and intent. If you just end up with a sore throat, you relied on your vocal cords and you were doing the Kiai wrong. Simple as that.
That link is essential for timing too, isn't it? You need to hold that breath, maintain that core tension. The source suggests holding the breath in the stomach during the preparatory movement, like the 1, 2, 3 count as the sword rises, and then releasing that compressed, powerful air with the Kiai at the exact moment of the strike.
Exactly. You're compressing and holding that core power, building pressure until the instant of maximum acceleration and release. It adds explosive force to the cut.
Okay, finally in this section, let's revisit strategy through using different tools. If my goal is endurance, the source suggests using a lighter sword. Now, I have to push back a little here. Common sense, or at least common strength training logic, might say if I want endurance, I should use a heavier weapon. Build the muscle needed to handle my regular shinai for longer.
That's a totally logical question and a common one.
Yeah.
But the perspective here shifts slightly away from just building brute strength towards refining control mechanics. Paradoxically, a lighter sword can actually make it harder to stop the momentum cleanly, because you can't rely as much on the sheer weight of the sword for control and deceleration. This forces you, the practitioner, to develop much better control through precise muscle activation and really impeccable form, especially in your wrist action and keeping that left pinky tight.
So the lighter sword exposes flaws in your control faster.
Precisely. If you grab a really heavy sword, especially when you're still developing your form, it encourages tension. You start trying to muscle the strike around using big, gross arm movements. The basic efficient form gets abandoned because you're just trying to heave the weight. A lighter sword demands that you maintain the correct sequential mechanism, that whip action we talked about, otherwise the strike will just fly wild. You end up training finesse and control under duress, which at the end of the day is more valuable for precise cutting than just building bulky arm muscles. Save the really heavy Suburi for when your fundamental form is absolutely rock solid and unshakable.
All right, the final section brings in another person. It addresses training with a partner, which is obviously a fantastic way to develop muscle memory, especially using resistance. But before we even add resistance, the source really wants us to focus on the intricate sequential mechanisms of movement that these partner drills are designed to reinforce in the first place.
Yeah, this is fascinating. It's a really precise, almost clinical breakdown of how the sword should actually be lifted and lowered in basic practice. It's not just one fluid motion using the whole arm. It's a specific 4-part sequence, and it's often completely different from what people instinctively do when you just tell them, okay, raise the sword.
Let's define that sequence for lifting the sword mechanism. This is for foundational basics, right? Not necessarily the super fast lift you might use in a competitive shiai. The proper sequence is kansaki, the tip, initiates first, then the wrists engage, then the elbows bend, and finally the shoulders lift slightly.
Exactly. Following that sequence ensures you're activating the joints in the correct, most efficient order. The kansaki leading the way sets the cutting path right from the start. And the source notes that initiating with the tip and then the wrist is actually biomechanically easier than trying to just heave the whole weight up using your entire arm from the shoulder. By leading with the tip and wrist, you establish the correct circular path for the cutting motion. You ensure the joints are working together smoothly to create that arc. You're essentially raising the sword by leading with the point.
Okay, tip, wrist, elbow, shoulder on the way up. And the sequence is reversed for striking down mechanism, which the source vividly describes as a whip motion.
Right. The downward sequence mirrors the upward one, but focused on power delivery. Shoulders engage down first, using those lats, then elbows drive down, then the wrists flex and extend powerfully, and finally the kansaki, the tip, connects last. This perfectly explains why you feel that extra forward snap at the end. The tip is the terminus of that sequential whip, the point of maximum acceleration just before impact. This downward sequence ensures the power originates from your torso and shoulders, and then your wrists transmit and amplify that force right at the end. If you break the sequence, say, your elbows drop way before your shoulders engage, the power gets localized in the arms and feels weak.
Now we can finally apply these precise mechanisms to partner resistance training. The partner applies light resistance against the downward strike. Why light?
The light resistance is key because it isolates that final whip mechanism. It allows you, the striker, to focus purely on activating your wrists and elbows correctly, getting that snap, without worrying too much about distance or hitting a specific target. The resistance needs to be just enough that it can be overcome by using correct form, not by just resorting to brute strength.
Okay, but here's maybe the most critical, non-obvious detail in this whole section. How the partner actually applies that resistance. If you're holding resistance, say, trying to prevent your partner from lifting their sword or resisting their downward strike, the resistance needs to follow a half-circle trajectory.
This is a real golden nugget of teaching advice right here. We have to ask, why the half circle? Why can't the partner just push straight down against the sword if resisting a strike, or straight up if resisting a lift?
My first thought is pushing straight down would offer the most direct resistance, wouldn't it?
It would offer the most linear resistance, yes. But it would inadvertently train poor cutting mechanics. Think about it.
Yeah.
If the partner just pushes straight down hard, what does the striker instinctively do to overcome that force? They tend to just push straight up with their arms. Going straight up completely bypasses the essential cutting circle. It bypasses that crucial sequential mechanism we just detailed. Kansaki, wrist, elbow, shoulder. Remember, the Japanese sword is curved. It's designed to move in an arc to maximize its slicing potential.
Ah. So the resistance has to force the striker to use the correct circular path to generate power effectively.
Precisely. Therefore, the partner needs to push against the correct circular cutting path. By resisting the arc itself, you encourage the striker to engage that sequential joint activation, wrist, elbow, shoulder, needed to overcome the pressure while maintaining the correct circular geometry. If the partner just shoves straight down with their arm, the striker just shoves straight up with their arm. No real learning happens. But if the partner resists the arc, the striker is forced to activate the sequence correctly to maintain the geometry of a proper cut. You're essentially coaching the striker's body through resistance, to move the way a curved sword is meant to move.
So if my partner is new to Kendo and I'm the one being resisted, I might actually need to coach them on how to provide the right kind of resistance. Explain the goal isn't just to stop me, but to make me use the right sequence.
Absolutely. The training here is all about reinforcing the correct mechanism, not just building maximum strength against linear force. If the striker just uses their whole arm to overcome simple resistance, they're bypassing the crucial wrist and elbow action entirely. You want the striker to feel that arsing resistance and consciously think, okay, Kensaki leads, now wrist, now elbow engages, and manchana. The partner's job is to enforce that sequence by resisting the correct circular trajectory.
This leads perfectly into the final conceptual distinction the source makes regarding the physics of cutting. The source acknowledges something that seems counterintuitive at first. Smaller linear legs are technically faster, just based on simple physics. A straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points.
Yet, as we've just discussed, the foundational basic movements in Kendo, and Aikido too, are deliberately curved. It seems like an inherent paradox, right? Why train the arc if a straight line is faster? The answer lies in the tool itself. The Japanese sword is curved. It relies on slicing a slice in, maybe a slice pulling back to cut effectively, not just chopping. So while yes, small, fast, linear movements are definitely used in competitive shiai for scoring points quickly, the foundation is built on the curved movement. Why? To train the proper cutting mechanics that suit the katana's structure. The basics absolutely must train the slice, and that fundamentally requires the arc. It requires that whip motion we've been dissecting. You have to master the efficient, powerful arc first before you can distill that power and control into a faster, more economical straight-line thrust or tap for competition.
The depth of instruction here is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
It really confirms that the basics are never actually simple, are they? They're about internalizing some pretty complex physical laws and biomechanics. So what does this all mean for you, the practitioner sweating it out at home? I think the primary takeaway has to be solo practice demands hypervigilance. Constant self-awareness. You are your own best source of feedback, but only if you're checking every single one of these minute, often non-obvious details we've discussed. Everything from how your thumb sits on the handle before you even move, to how you engage your deep abdominal core during Kiai, right up to the exact height of your left elbow at the very end of the strike.
Yeah, this material really gives you, the learner, an explicit, detailed checklist. It helps you move beyond just, swinging a stick around towards actually training the real biomechanics of cutting, control, and efficiency. And that critical distinction the source makes, setting your specific goal for each training session. Deciding if today is about slew form correction or speed or high quantity endurance. It's such a powerful tool for structuring your practice effectively. It ensures you never waste a single repetition reinforcing flawed technique.
Okay, a final provocative thought for you to chew on long after this deep dive is over. Given the huge emphasis we heard on maintaining that intense V grip, really clamping down with the bottom 2 fingers of the left hand, a tension that anchors the shinai, how does maintaining that intense yet somehow relaxed control during fast, repetitive Suburi translate into the sudden, powerful stop you need to execute? The stop required to prevent overextension and maintain your center in a chaotic, high-speed competition setting. Think about that incredibly fine balance between tension, controlled release, and instantaneous retention needed at the highest levels. It was great to share this episode with you. If you'd like, please visit our Facebook page, and if you'd like to support our project, just add a simple, inexpensive like. Thank you, and see you next episode.
Thank you for listening to this podcast.
Kendo e Aido Italia, il podcast.